Now it's time to show me the evidence. So far, you should have written your thesis statement for your junior project, or at least what we call a working thesis, because remember, the thesis can change. That's all right. That's great. Now you need to prove the thesis. You can't expect people to take you at your word. You need to provide evidence, of course, but not just evidence. Your evidence needs to be the good stuff. Otherwise, your whole argument will fall apart. So it's time to learn about relevant evidence, okay? This is what our target is all about. Learning target W, which of course stands for writing relevant evidence. This is the learning target we are talking about now. By the end of this playlist, your goal is to be able to say, I can find and present evidence that is relevant to my thesis claim. As always, remember, you can use and reuse all of the resources in this playlist to help you master this target. You might have to rewind, you might have to repeat things. That's fine. Do it if you need to. All right, let's talk about how you're going to be assessed. This is our proficiency scale starting at the bottom. To score a 1, roughly a 20%, means you cannot find and present evidence that meets requirements for evidence relevance, even with my assistance. To score a 2, getting up to a 40%, you can find and present evidence that meets some requirements for evidence relevance, or you rely on my assistance to get the job done. So to be passing, to get this 3, 60%, means that you can find and present evidence that is relevant to your thesis claim and meets all requirements for evidence relevance without my assistance. Okay. To get a 4, so we're starting to get up into the B range, you can do everything for a 3, everything listed here, and you can explain in your own words how each piece of evidence is relevant. So you're explaining how the evidence meets all the requirements for evidence relevance, which of course you'll learn all about in this playlist. Now to get to the very top, to get a 5, which is getting to a high A, you can do everything here, you can do everything here, and you can find and present evidence that supports the concession in your thesis. This evidence meets all requirements, relevance requirements for the opposing point of view. So not only would you be researching and providing evidence for your own side of the argument, but also for the opponent's side of the argument as well. It's called a counterclaim, and being able to counter what the opposition might say. It's a very important skill, so that's how you're going to get to the top on this one. Okay, if you're preparing to collect evidence to support your thesis statement, these are the things that you need to keep in mind, and these are the things that we're going to learn about. 1, all of the evidence must be relevant to the claim. Okay, the evidence must directly prove some aspect of your thesis. Okay, it needs to be very clear. They need to match each other very closely. So don't just hunt for evidence that vaguely mentions something that you mention in your thesis. There needs to be a very clear-cut and direct relation between the evidence you provide and the argument you're making in your thesis claim. Second of all, the evidence needs to be relevant to the times. Get with the times, man. The evidence must be as current as possible. Do not provide me with evidence from 1970, especially if you're writing about something scientific. It would obviously be far outdated because we make scientific discoveries and revolutions have happened since then in science. So as an example, but we'll learn more about how to do that later on. And 3, make sure that your evidence is relevant to the authorities. So you need to appeal only to legit authorities or credible sources, okay? So remember when we learned in a previous playlist about fallacies of relevance, okay? One of them was appeals to false authority. So if you quote somebody in your evidence who is an authority in a field completely separate from what you're talking about, okay, that would be an appeal to a false authority. We, of course, learned about those before because I want you to avoid these in your own argument. I, of course, also don't want you citing somebody as evidence who is just attacking other people, which is ad hominem, somebody who is trying to appeal to people's emotions to distract them from the facts. I don't want you to cite somebody who is saying everybody's doing this, so we should too. That would be bandwagon fallacy. But more specifically, I'm really wanting you to make sure that you are using credible sources. And of course, you will learn all about how to ensure that as we will break these down within our playlist. This is the same note that I gave you during the last playlist, but I want to repeat it. Okay? Please note, thesis composition and research are conjoined circular processes. You will undoubtedly bounce back and forth between tweaking your thesis and doing your research. Let your continued research inform changes to your thesis. I expect a lot of you will make changes to your thesis that you already presented to me as you are researching, and that is fine. It's not going to change your grade on that. I've already recorded your grade for your thesis writing target. That's fine. Okay, at this point you've proven to me how well you can compose a thesis statement. But you might make changes as you start researching. Okay, I'm going to continue reading here. You aren't married to anything. You are not married to that thesis statement just because you've already been assessed on it. If you try to stick to a thesis that is difficult to prove with research, you will be miserable throughout this project, and I do not want you to be miserable. Okay? So now you're going to dig deeper. You did some very light research to be able to compose your thesis statement, but now you are doing deep research to try to prove that thesis. If you find that you simply cannot find enough good, credible sources, relevant evidence to support some aspect of your thesis statement, then change your thesis statement to reflect the research that you are finding. Okay? This is a natural step in the writing process, especially for this type of essay when you are researching.